have and all of our aspirations. And when we look in the creatures that are made on the earth, I mean, just it's an amazing, the billions of types of species that we have. Just count the number of beetles, for instance, and the stars in the sky. How many trillions of stars are there, right? The universe is infinite. And yet, here we are. It is all in this one point at one time, right? Our consciousness grows. And so we're aware of that part of God that we know. And so part of what our calling is to expand our awareness of knowing that we are one with God and God is all there is. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And when the reading Brenda had this morning, there is only God. God is all there is. And these are really simple words, but they transform our whole perception of life, Everything, all people, all creatures, all things are a part of God. Now, God is not this anthropomorphic God that's out there or up in the heaven, maybe with a long beard and a white robe. No, God is. All of life is the body of God. God is within us. God is expressing himself in us and as us. Right? We are the eyes and the hands and the ears and the voice of spirit, the legs to move and serve other parts of God. Right? So instead of seeing ourselves and everyone else as separate and beings randomly moving around and interacting, we realize that we are each a part of God, interacting with the other parts of God. Each relationship is ultimately a relationship with another part of God. So to know this is to live in awe and wonder. Right? Now today we're going to talk about this, but we're going to take it a step further, and to say that if God is love and God is all, then all is love. Because we are wholly part of the one. We are created by love and of love. That is our true nature. We are an expression of divine love as every person, every creature, and everything in the universe. So how do we discover God? How do we know God? Now in the reading, Ernest Holmes wrote, and it was in the home study course to his students, week 48. I mean, it's a very loving letter. How would you like to get that letter, with your lesson, right, and read it? And some of these lines are just so amazing. A sense of the indwelling presence must be real and immediate. I mean, as Brenda said, in some ways, that's all we need to know. When we have that indwelling experience of the divine, we could just spend our days being in that moment, right? It's so awesome. Holmes also said the thought and the idea of God must become warm and immediate and colorful in your consciousness. All right? This is not this vindictive, judgmental God that's waiting to judge us and be angry, and every little thing has to be perfect, and or else we're going to end up in hellfire and damnation. No. God is this warm and loving, intimate entity. It is a divine intention, but it is everywhere present as well. To Ernest Holmes, the secret of secret is that all things are manifestations of that one presence, the one power, the one life. This isn't a mechanical, unfeeling presence of a universe that just unfolds automatically. Scientifically, it's all about chemistry and the laws of physics. There is a law that manifests in forms when we set up our intentions of what we believe, really, and the law manifests like a mirror. But the difference is that we control our intentions. We can change our thinking and change our life. The universal intelligence, God, the One, is the God of infinite love that is everywhere present, including within us, our guide. So God manifests itself in the world through us and as us all. And this is the big and, it will respond to us so that we know that we are not alone. Ernest Holmes knew God as a loving, indwelling presence. He said, there is no place where you, the individual, leaves off, and God, the universal I am, begins. The two are one, the one and only. Right? Just think of that. If you look at your fingers and you shift into that soft gaze, perhaps in a meditation. And this happened to me one time. I had a cosmic consciousness experience when I was meditating when I was in college, and I looked at my hands and I didn't see an edge to my fingers. There was just a transition into everything else in the universe. And I imagined the farthest corner of the universe that I could imagine, and there was God, but there was also little tiny pieces of me. Right? We have that consciousness. When we go into that oneness, we are everywhere present as well. We can all know everything without ever knowing how, because we are tuned into the divine. It's like hooking your computer up to the internet, and you can know everything, right? So, and also Ernest Holmes knew that infinite love guides our way. Always. Always. We just have to ask and listen. Right? If we want to know love, if we want to discover the divine, we only have to look within and listen to that voice of spirit within our hearts and within our souls. Now, there's a Hindu story, a legend, about there was a time when all human beings were gods. Now, in the Hindu teaching, they have lots of different gods, but Brahman is the overall god. So it's all a part of it, and just elevating different aspects of the divine, really. But the human beings abused their divinity. So Brahma, the chief god, decided to take the divinity away from them and hide it somewhere so they could never find it. Brahma called a council of the gods to help him decide where to hide the divinity. Oh, let's bury it deep in the earth, the gods suggested. But Brahma answered, no, humans will dig into the earth and they will find it eventually. Some gods suggested, let's sink it to the bottom of the ocean, the deepest ocean. And Brahma said, no, humans will learn to dive into the ocean and we'll find it. And we have. And then some gods suggested, let's take it to the top of the highest mountain and hide it there. And Brahma replied, well, humans will eventually climb every mountain and they will find their divinity. Then all the gods gave up and said, we don't know where to hide it, because it seems that there is no place on earth or the ocean that the human beings won't discover their divinity. So the Brahma thought for a long time, and then he had the answer. We will hide their divinity deep in the center of their own being. Humans will search for it here and there, but they won't look at the divinity inside their true selves. So all the gods agreed that this was the perfect hiding place, and the deed was done. And since then, humans have been going up and down the earth, digging and diving and climbing and exploring, searching for their divinity, which already lies within themselves. Right? Divinity lies within us all. We can lose ourselves with all this doing and all this getting, this preoccupation in exploring and taking charge of the physical world. But this Hindu story suggests that the divinity that we're looking for is the divinity within us all. It's not all about our accomplishments. We are already an inseparable part of the divine. We don't have to please God. We are already part of God. We are already God's beloved. And so to discover what God is, we have to look within to our own hearts and being. Ernest Holmes said in the Science of Mind textbook, the only God man knows is the God of his own inner life. He can know no other. To assume that man can know a God outside himself is to assume that he can know something of which he cannot be conscious. He goes on, this does not mean that man is God. It means that the only God that man knows is within, and the only life man has is from within. God is not external, but is indwelling at the very center of man's being. So let's think this through a little bit more. In the Bible, in Genesis 5:1, it says, "When God created man, He made him in the likeness of God." So one of the things that we often do as humans is that when we look within God, we don't discover the God. God is not made in our image. We have all of our fears and anxieties, our judgments, our anger, and all these things that come and go, and that's not what God is. God is the changeless. And so we are made in the image and likeness of God. That is who we are, that we are waiting to discover. And then as our understanding of God grows, our ability to embody that greater possibility expands. In the book, Can We Talk to God? Ernest Holmes said, "I believe that God is to each one what that person is to God. The divine nature must be infinite. We know only as much of this nature as we can embody." Right? So, if it's like if you can only count to 10, that's what you have. But if you know to count to 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000, just imagine how that makes your world so much bigger, right? And so that's getting to know God. Now, how we relate to the world is how we relate to God. If we begin with the principle that God is all there is as the basis of our thinking, we can be spiritually minded, right? So this means that we realize the complete unity of God and its creation. We're whole-minded then, right? The wholeness of God, the unity of life. And to be whole-minded is to be holy. Or as Ricky Byers likes to sing, we're holy, 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 right? We're sacred. We're a sacred creation. And this also means that all of our relationships are relationships with another part of God. Fred Rogers said, "If you could only sense how important you are to the lives of those you meet, there is something of yourself that you leave at every meeting with another person." Right? Each interaction might just seem like a smile, holding the door open, someone you meet in the checkout line, at the grocery store. It's all a meeting with God. Now, if we want to change our world, if we look out and we don't like what we see, we're looking at parts of God. But how do we change that? Well, we start with ourselves by changing the quality of our relationships with the world. Right? We do that by changing our thinking pattern, by letting go of our beliefs, our thinking patterns, and the habits, those ruts that we've really dug deep in our lives, that these are the barriers that keep us from experiencing those greater possibilities that are known in the infinite mind of God rather than our finite limited experience. It's like when they put blinders on a horse so they won't get distracted by everything else going on. Well, when we put blinders on, we get distracted from the greater possibilities and we just get stuck going straight forward in the same path over and over and over. So last night, my husband and I, well, not last night, Friday night, we went to see Hadestown, the musical. And it's based on several Greek myths, including the story of Hades, who was the brother of Zeus and god of the underworld. And Hades kidnapped his niece, a little incest there, but Persephone, and he married her. And so she agreed to stay with him in the underworld for half of the year, which is fall and winter, as long as she could come back to the upper world in the summer for spring and summer and be with her mother and with the flowers and the sun and the trees and everything that she loved. Now this cycle happens over and over again each year, even though it's sad. And so this story, I won't give it all away, but it goes into the cycles of struggle that we have with love and poverty and the fates. Right? We think that it's just going to happen over and over again. This generation is like the next and the next, right? And there is a belief that these cycles must continue forever. That's a barrier that keeps us individually and collectively caught in these endless cycles. Right? We want to have a world that's more inclusive, that changes. All of this violence that's going on, just whether it's person to person or gun violence or country to country, all of these things that we there's so much. I read an article about a woman was saying that she had an experience staying at a hotel in Las Vegas that brought her face to face with the experience of what gun violence is really like. She she was, in her hotel, and she was going to go downstairs to get something to eat. And when she walked out into the hallway, she was getting onto the elevator, and then this whole crowd of people crushed into the elevator, and they must have 15 people or so on the elevator. And the door wouldn't close, and everybody's in a total panic. They said, "Oh, there's a shooter." Everybody's totally going crazy, and the door wouldn't close. And so they finally figured out there's too many people. It's too heavy. So two men got off to take, whatever their fate would be. And the door closed and they went down to the first floor. Well, eventually, she found out that what had happened is a plate glass had broken. And that sound, somebody thought it was a shooter. And it went out on the internet, and people all over the strip in Las Vegas were on a similar panic. And it was just crazy. We are so primed to, kids go through these drills of protecting themselves. They know more about, we knew about a nuclear war drill growing up, but they know about take cover because there's a shooter in the building, right? Just think of all the stress that this takes. We are primed to expect this. We need to change our expectations if we're going to change any of this. And so, how do we do that? The cycles don't have to continue. We have to align ourselves with that inner light, that there can be a new pattern set in motion. Remember, in the Bible it said, it's our Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, Jesus said. Right? The divine gifts are freely and generously given, and it's up to us to see them and to receive them with gratitude. In the Course in Miracles, there's a famous quote that some people had thought that it was by Rumi, but it's actually from A Course in Miracles. Your task is not to seek for love, for merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. So the love is always here. But we think that to protect ourselves, we have to build this barrier. This person's not safe. This person's different me. They're definitely not safe. And I want someone that looks just like this. And I'm going to hang on for dear life. And they better not change because I want them to be that same way for the rest of our lives. And so we're looking for safety outside of ourselves in a relationship. And so that relationship becomes one that's tying us down, and it's like those blinders, right? A true relationship that's built on that divine love of possibilities allows each person to lift up and evolve and grow. This is an amazing change in a relationship. My mother and father were married for 50 years, more than 50 years, and they talked about how about every 10 years they had to renegotiate their marriage because they were different people. The world was different. And so that's what kept it alive and young and vibrant, right? Now, these barriers also mean that if we don't feel loved, it's because we are looking for love outside of ourselves. We are looking that this is what love looks like. I bought this package, and this is what I want, and I don't want any of the other options that are there in the store. I want this one. Of course, somebody else already took it, so you get fixated on it or something like that, or the person passes away. But all of these things, these are whatever contrivance we come up with our mind, we come up with a barrier. But these barriers only exist if we construct mental and emotional barriers to block our perception of the divine love that is already within us. Right? Any sense of separation from love and from God is an illusion created by those barriers, because we are one. That is the truth of who we are. And so if there's a barrier, guess who put up that barrier? It's not the divine, it's us. And that means it can be taken down. All right. Now, what are these some of these other barriers that block our perception of God, of our greater good, of love? Well, part of it could be that anthropomorphic God. You know, we've got to please God. You know, this is the straight rules of how things need to be. It's written down in the book. Well, those are the rules of men, and well, men mostly, that were written down, that we're supposed to follow, and that's not the divine. You know, the experience of the divine. This is one thing I love about the Centers for Spiritual Living. It's about that spiritual experience directly with the divine, of knowing who we are, right? Of seeing that there's something greater, rather than closing us down to follow this same way, that we have to have relationships in certain ways. And that also that if everyone is a part of God, what does that say about things like holding grudges, you know, over past events that happened, you know, last week or maybe a century ago or just a year ago, right? What does it say about forgiveness? You know, forgiveness frees us more, even more than it forgives the person we forgive. What about people pleasing? That's a good one. That, you know, we think that if you're going to love me, I have to please you. But what about courageously speaking our truth as a voice of spirit? Right? Standing up to being that voice of spirit. Perhaps acting passively aggressively against anyone. We're acting against a child of God. Holding on tight to our limited riches, thinking that they're limited in the first place, versus sharing the infinite abundant flow of life with all people. You know, it's all God. It's, you know, money is just, it's God energy in form, right? It's the divine flow that's underneath it all. So it's being in that flow is what frees us up, rather than saying this is mine and I'm going to hang on because there's not enough to go around. Well, there's plenty. Now, as we heal each barrier to developing loving, forgiving, and wonderful relationships, we also strengthen our relationship with God and as God. Right? To remove these barriers, we could wage a mighty battle, you know, and that would only then strengthen the barriers and create further separation. You know, if you're fencing with something, it gives it strength and creates that separation between you and it. So the alternative is to compassionately embrace the barriers, embrace the fear. Be compassionate, whether it's our fear or someone else, but those barriers were built up as protective barriers for some reason. And what is that underlying thing? That is what needs to be healed. That is where the work begins. And when we do that, we unleash the power of the divine love to heal our wounds and take care of our fears and unfulfilled desires. As we let love dissolve the illusion of separation, the full wonder of divine love is revealed as the truth of our being. We are wholly loved, just as we are, a beloved creation of the divine. And so looking out with this consciousness of divine love, we can open our hearts to the whole world and all people without fear of external experiences, because they too are a part of God, the one and only. Michael Beckwith summed these thoughts up very well. He said, "Do you realize how much effort it takes to block your blessing? How much effort it takes to prevent God from being God in your life, as your life? All of those habits that have been ensconced within you, the normalized fear and regular complaints, worry and doubt, have been an effort to go against the universal flow. Release it all now and start living in an adventure of expanded awareness. Prepare yourself for the great reveal, which is, we are the light." So step out of your comfort zone from the fear and the inertia that kept you blocking your old patterns. And heed the words from the Course in Miracles and remove all those barriers that have kept you safe, but really were your prison. Be ready to rise like the phoenix, ready to embrace the world with the wonder of spirit and embrace your own divinity. We are the cavalry that's coming to our rescue to save the day and unleash the divine wonder, grace, and love and power, the presence of the divine. It's not something out there that's going to save us. It is allowing that divine within us to rise up and heal the world and our own lives. So this week, choose one area of your life to work on. Maybe it's long-standing resentment or codependent or depending. Maybe it's fear of intimacy is holding you back. That's a big one, right? Perhaps you're judging a love relationship based on unreasonable expectations rather than building that relationship that you all both can expand and grow. Or maybe you're just playing small, playing it safe, rather than living life to the fullest. Whatever it is, take a stand. Listen to Spirit within. Ask for guidance. Reach out to a minister or a practitioner or a friend, their therapist. They will support you as you begin that healing process. As a part of the one and only, you deserve only the best. Let's take this to prayer. So as I breathe slowly in and out, I focus on the divine indwelling presence. There is no there, only here. There is no then, only now. There is no tomorrow, only today. There is no place where I end and God, the universal I am, begins. There is only God, the one and only. And so I let go of any feelings of fear, of limitation, of any barriers that have been holding me back. And that divine light fills my being and radiates around me and guides my way. I see what I must release, and I do. I see what I must embrace, what new paths I can take, and I do. I accept the generous gifts of the time, talent, and treasure that people graciously and lovingly share with me and with this center and with all the world. We love and support each other to experience that the greater yet to be. My life rises to new levels of grace, of joy and love and wonder. All my relationships are transformed by the power of love. We are all lifted up to higher levels of consciousness together. It brings greater love, greater wholeness, and greater peace on the earth. I bless this Center for Spiritual Living Tahoe-Truckee, and all of the people who love and serve here and in the world as parts of the one. My heart is full of joy and gratitude to be here, to be loved, and to be fully alive. All is well. And so I let go and I let God make it so. This is the truth of who we are. And so it is.